Welcome back to the OPEX podcast where fitness is explained. I am your host, Robbie Burke, and I'm joined on today's show by my very good friend, Brett Bartholomew. On this episode, Brett and I discuss all things physical preparation for American football. This was an excellent interview with Brett, guys. I know you're going to love it. Stay with us. Bartholomew, it is an absolute pleasure and an honor to have you come on to the OPEX podcast. I really appreciate you making time. I know you're super busy, but for everyone who's watching this and listening to this, no doubt they know who you are. What I want you to do, though, is give us the rundown on your past year to 18 months, because it has been a whirlwind. So go ahead, and then we're going to get into physical preparation for American football.
Yeah, no problem. Which is ironic because I think one of the first podcasts I ever did was with you. I think I did one on Strength Coach podcast, one with Mark Watts, and then one with you we barely knew one another. Last year and a half, in the last year, I've written a book, co-authored a couple more, was an adjunct professor for a university course based on the book, created an online course as a follow-up to the book, out of the really a lot of coaches asking for, what's next. And, you'd look at them and be like, well, the book's not even a year old. The book wasn't a year old until really mid-April of this year. I continue to coach. So during the week I coach, during the weekends I go present at clinics and speak. I started a business called The Bridge Human Performance, which is based around professional development, based around coaches that want to do a little bit more crossing over into different avenues. And they love their day job. They love what they're doing, day in and day out training athletes, but they also want to get more involved in things like speaking or writing or consulting. And, I never knew how to get into that stuff. And so we're trying to provide a pathway of doing that. Started artofcoaching.com, which is the main site that my site is linked on. And then I'm also the senior vice president for a not-for-profit called Movement to Be, which helps young kids in impoverished communities learn more about movement and sport and physical activity and all those things. So it's a brief overview.
Sweet. I didn't know about the last gig you have going on, but a million and one things. How has the bought-in course gone?
Good. Yeah, we opened it once for 5 days, as kind of a beta to see everything. As you know, it's really the first product out there or resource out there based on the science behind the art of coaching, right? Like everything else. A lot of things out there are leadership books and just kind of generalities. We really wanted to create a resource that had peer-reviewed references, scientific application, practical application, all in a one-stop shop. We were hoping for about 200 participants. We ended up getting about 450 in the first course, which is
wow.
Great. We're looking at reopening it in June, probably going to be late June for anybody listening to this. So we're excited about that. And that's something that is a direct result of their feedback. If people didn't like the course or, the course didn't meet its objectives, we were just going to kind of do a one and done. But we had a really good response from the community, built a really good community around it. And so going to go for another round.
Sweet. Absolutely amazing. Delighted for you. So as I was saying to you, I can imagine so many people watching or listening, they were like, oh, Brett Bartholomew's on. I bet you it's going to be about conscious coaching and, the art of coaching and coach-athlete relationships. And I was like, no, I'm gonna screw this all up for everyone. We're going to just talk hardcore training, because I know that you are just as passionate about the science of training as you are about the coaching aspect and relationship building and whatnot. So I really wanted to give you a platform to get into that. So the topic really about today is physical preparation for American football, because I know you train a lot of footballers. I know along with military, that's one of your big passions is to train NFL, Division I college, and obviously work with the military. So first question is to you is, so what do you do? What is your philosophy? So maybe get into your philosophy when it comes to training American football players, and then we'll break it into the systems.
Yeah, real easy. 10 years ago, if you were to ask me that question, I'd probably come up with the most fancy way to, explain everything, because that used to be the in vogue thing. I remember when I was younger, I'd see strength coaches get on and sit there and talk about the bioenergetic capacities and the intracellular matrix, and just, you're like, dude, what, reading a book? With my philosophy, I lift weights at different speeds and different volumes at different loads in different ways at different times of year. So I'll use everything from variable resistance training to velocity-based training to old school, just straight, linear periodization. For anybody that's a periodization nerd out there, you probably laugh at that term because no periodization scheme is truly linear, but everybody also knows what I mean by that. A lot of it is taking out the illusion that these guys come in, they're advanced trainees in the weight room. They're not. I had one of the leading wide receivers in the NFL come last year and say that he hadn't lifted over 225, over 100 kilos in 5 years. And he laughed about it. He was pretty proud about it. And I said, well, why not? He goes, because I don't have to, man. This is God-given, And I had 3 guys this offseason tell me they don't do plyometrics with their team. And I didn't believe that at first because, if you were the head strength coach for a team, even if you won a Super Bowl, somebody would whine about you, right? There's always an athlete that's going to say, we don't do that. And really, they probably just don't pay attention. I said, no, time out. You know what plyometrics are, right? They can involve, and I listed off about 10 different exercises. Man, I'm telling you, we do very little to no jumping whenever we are, in season or even before training camp. So my job, is really to triage and bridge the gap between these guys and their team. A lot of times team strength coaches just don't have the time to do certain stuff. Sometimes they're under leadership that doesn't allow them to do what they want. And I don't really look at that as a competition. I try to look at my interaction with them as a partnership. And it's been something that's grown over the years. Thankfully, there's guys in the team setting now that know I'm not some voodoo-based guru guy trying to steal the show or do anything crazy with my guys. My job is to make their job easier by making sure these guys are in a structured, organized program. So we train 4 days a week unless you're a free agent. Free agents right now during this period, I'll train 3 days a week. They could get a call at any time. I'm experimenting with kind of a unique model with the free agents right now where, I'm kind of alternating neural days and more volume-oriented days.
Why so?
Well, a couple of reasons. One, they go through my off-season training program for these guys, from onset to encore. In late January, early February, we're really starting foundational, right? We just try to get these guys going again. I try to really assess where they're all at. Again, some of these guys are, strong as all get out and gifted, but I still have to start them with a goblet squat or double kettlebell squat, front squat. Some of them have never back squatted. I have some guys that haven't squatted. I have a 10-year veteran that hasn't squatted in 8 years, just does a leg press with his team. Mm-hmm. So the first 4 weeks is really me getting them back into that, just straightforward periodization. I don't even really collect numbers during that period. I just try to get them in there because I don't want to be disillusioned by the learning effect as opposed to a training adaptation, right? Mm-hmm. After that, we'll start getting into more general strength and max strength qualities. And then I get into a contrast phase, a little bit more power-oriented or a modified conjugate where we hit everything. So the reason why when people are free agents is, after most of them have been through anywhere from that 6 to 12-week training cycle, depending on when they start, they've kind of checked the basic boxes, and now they're in a position where they could get called at any time. Yes. So one, the NFL is taking a continually increased interest in lean body mass. I had a general manager from a team text me this year saying he literally wanted his wide receivers, 2 of which I was training at 6% or lower, which is kind of alarming for me. 6%, most good receivers were naturally lean anyway, so that's not unheard of. But he was even wanting some of them 5% or lower. And, a lot of it was just based off kind of metrics that, I said, where are you getting this data? Where this statement was, I've never seen a Hall of Fame wide receiver that's less than 5% body fat. And I'm like, with all due respect, sir, what's that based off of? That data. And he's like, well, I've been having conversations with this guy and this guy. And they weren't really, they're educated individuals, but weren't really people that were educated in the aspects of collision sports. You need a little bit of body fat as a protective mechanism for internal organs, padding, and basic just hormone, hormone, what I have to do. And this is part of art of coaching. You have to take what you hear is important to these guys. And they're saying, we're paying attention to lean body mass. We're going to put them through the ringer. So when I have this guy and he's trained with me for about 12 weeks now, one, we know we need to switch up the scheme from time to time. Now I never get too cute with it. The body adapts to the rep range the most quickly. So you can alter exercises and continue on the same program for quite a long time, as you know, but this guy kind of needs a little bit more stimulation. Heavy strength training really takes a lot out of him. He's a neurally kind of loaded guy anyway. You can see he really performs well in ballistic, fast twitch type movements. but the next day it'll take a good toll on him. And we can't afford that if he's going to get a call on any given Monday or Tuesday. So by using we have A, B, C, and D, again, 2 neural workouts where, as you can imagine, that's fast-based Olympic movements or, jump squats or depth jumps, something that really will hit kind of more of the velocity continuum from a weightlifting standpoint. I don't really worry about them getting too heavy on that for now, especially because some of them are still brutal at it and novices. But then we'll do heavy squats, heavy deadlifts, heavy bench, whatever that will kind of encompass, and then some auxiliary work or will kind of encompass the neural days. Whereas more of the body comp or metabolic days are kind of like mini circuits, so to speak. And there's an element of density training in there as well that's controlled. So it's just a way that, I'm able to hit both sides. Some weeks it's 2 neural and 1 metabolic focused day. The next week it might be 2 more metabolically focused days, 1 neural. Now we're always going to have elements of everything in every program. So even on a metabolic day, we're still doing some aspect of jumps or ballistic throws or what have you. Like I know people are trying to act like micro-dosing is some new term. The reality is we've been doing this for years. Now we just have a label on it. I mean, that term in general came from the community talking about like drugs. People were microdosing with LSD to try to combat depression. People have microdose. So with training, just the idea that some element of top speed or ballistic or neural demand should be a part of it at all moments really shouldn't elude any of us.
It's like Lauren Lando saying about the snake venom.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. And so, I have to be careful when I'm on podcasts because people will hear me say we have a neural day, metabolic day, things like that. And they'll think, oh, so that's all you're doing that day is getting them tired? No, there's always technical aspects. And it's not much different than the Husker Power program did in the early 90s, which was tremendously successful for them. They had more speed-oriented Olympic-based days where there was a lot of sprints, Olympic lifts, jumps, plyos, and then other days that were focused more on lean body mass gain. It's also, football's a very different game. These guys have to have lean body mass to spare because, again, it's even though the rule changes, they're going to continue to take hits. I would say all in all, though, my philosophy is I'm the guy that, and I tell this to the players, I'm the guy that you come to when you guys feel like you've lost a step, when you feel like you've lost strength, or you're trying to get back to the roots of what got you here in the first place. Many of them get to the NFL and specialize highly. Many off-season NFL trainers, and there's some great ones out there, but there's also ones that try to make names for themselves by basically just being souped-up position coaches. They say sport-specific this, sport-specific that. I look at it as these guys are about to do 18 weeks in season of sport-specific stuff. Not to mention training camp and everything else. And I tell them this, I go, guys, what's the number one quality you think y'all lose in season? And some of them will be like speeds. And I'm like, no, man, like what do you do less of dramatically in season? Eventually somebody will get it. Oh, strength training.
Yeah.
So I can't control that. But what I can do is try to make sure that their bank account, so to speak, is full as it can be, so that as they do start to decrease their training frequency, volume, or intensity over the course of the season, that they're at least starting off on a higher kind of peak than they would have been normally. Yeah. So that's the philosophy from a weight training standpoint. I just call it fundamentals, not fluff. If somebody were to come watch us train, they're going to see the basic movements. They're going to see me continuing to try to cue these guys up. A lot of them come in with tendinopathies, so we'll do a lot of isometrics early on, eccentric. So yeah, pretty straightforward and spans the curve of things.
So just going off the back of what you just said there in terms of guys coming in, they're banged up, tendinopathy, like a logical question a lot of people are going to ask is like, are you doing like athlete profiling? Are you assessing? And then, because, they're like, well, you kind of need to know where they're at. And like, but in fairness, and I think this is probably where you're going to go to, is like, these guys are like coming like from the end of their season and they're all banged up, that would be the worst time to like test them. It's just like, it's just going to be like, you're wrecked and your qualities are crap, and it's just to show they're crap. But do you do anything in particular from a profiling or and even just a screening or orthopedic standpoint? Is there anything you're doing in that regard that's obviously and programming?
So I don't know if most people know, I'm in Atlanta. My wife and I moved here last year, and we had originally looked at opening a facility. And
the barn.
Yeah, if I had my way, like if I was a multi-millionaire today, I always joke that I'd just buy some 2-acre piece of land, open up like a shed, that's like,
Oh, shit.
3,000 square feet, has a boxing ring, platforms, weights, everything.
So good.
And I'd probably just be a hermit and send people out some invites and be like, yo, I'm going to take 20 to 30 athletes, every quarter of the year. Come out if you're not high maintenance and you just want to work, you're training out of the shed. And I just have
invitation only. Invitation. You're out. You're out.
It's funny. And if there's any younger strength coaches listening that are like 22, 23, or 25, whatever, and want to take the world by storm, it's funny. When you're younger, you think that you want to open up this awesome facility and you want to have this and that. Like, the older I get, the more simple my vision gets. Like, I would have a place that's just like bare bones basics. It would feel a lot more like a barbecue shop or a barber shop than it would a gym, like, because you want that aspect. And you know what? There's research to support that. Environment, has a drastic, Daniel Kahneman, I love this quote. He says, we are much more influenced by the moment of the environment that we are in by anything else. And, I had to paraphrase that a little bit, but what he says is like environment drives everything. Yeah, that's a great book. Yeah. But, casinos, people walk into casinos. There's a reason that people spend more money when they're in those environments. It's not just a matter of accessibility. You're seduced into it. Perfumed air, the way they design everything, no windows, no clocks. There's research that shows when people are in nightclubs that are paying more or playing more fast-paced music, they're going to consume more drinks because, again, it gets a sympathetic nervous system revved up. People stay up, and it's all a science, right? Like, a book I was reading was talking about how food labeling, almost everything is, tan packaging, green or beige and brown, because it's all supposed to look earthy, and
they don't go off.
Yeah, well, 100%, because most people don't think. Yeah. But at the same time, this goes into talent hotbeds too. Some of the people that come out of these talent hotbeds are used to dealing with nothing, and so there's a higher level of focus. There's not as many distractions. They're able to hone their skills and abilities. I would try to create that same kind of environment. I wouldn't create anything flashy, nuanced, sterile, medical, anything. But yeah, the short answer to your question is, so I train guys out of a massive private school here. I have an agreement with the school. I donate equipment to them. We get to help out the kids. It's a really cool thing because the kids are inspired by the pros. Keeps me from having to worry about massive overhead because, as you know, good coaches are hard to find. Every day I get asked, why aren't you opening your own place? It's very simple. What happens, and you ask anybody that opens their own facility, they hire some coaches. The coaches stay on for a little bit. They rarely care about the facility the same way you do. Mm-hmm. The minute a big NCAA job or pro sport job opens up, they want to bolt for that. Yep. There's very little loyalty, and there's very few strength coaches out there that understand both the coaching side of it and entrepreneurial side. Yeah. And, the minute I get into that rut now, and I'm just telling people the stark reality of it, now you're paying 20 to 30,000 plus in overhead. If you want to speak or you do any of that, I couldn't do it. I probably wouldn't be on this podcast with you because I'd have to run every single group. I co-owned a gym out in LA. Right? Like, I already lived that life. I know what it's like to have employees that maybe aren't as locked in or have the same goals. And what happens is you just continue to run on that hamster wheel. And my goal is to create a bigger kind of legacy in the community. I love, I didn't really have a mentor. So my goal is to kind of develop other strength coaches the way I wish I was developed, by giving them access to information that I either found the hard way or that's helped me or that came through my process. But where I'm going with this is the last 3 years of my life, I've worked in the gym in LA was in the second story of a Mexican restaurant. We had no budget because when I came in, the business was basically going under. It's a reason they brought me in to help kind of streamline everything, trim the fat, and get it going again. We couldn't even drop weights on the floor because the Mexican restaurant underneath, you'd knock their tequila bottles. The vibrations would basically knock the tequila bottles and glasses off. So we had to, all of a sudden, and I use Olympic lifts. So, we'd have to buy crash pads to dump the weight. You had very little, there were times where we were doing sprints outside on pavement. You'd have to make do with what you have. Well, here we have a much better scenario. I have a 100-yard football field, full track, full everything, about, 5,000 to 6,000 square foot weight room. But what they don't have is a lot of tech. So what I did is I ended up purchasing my own Brower, purchased my own contact map, purchased a number of equipment, and I literally throw it in the trunk of my car. and I drive down there like I'm going to do right after you and I get off this phone.
Yeah.
I take it out of the trunk of my car, no interns, no nothing. I set it up, and we'll do everything from, different variations of jump testing. We'll do reactive strength index. We'll do stuff like that, and we'll always try to get an idea of what the nervous system is telling. These guys, I go through questionnaires. They understand how to answer it, and most of them I have a relationship. I know when they're bullshitting or not. Of course, as any good evaluative screen has to have the subjective and objective. I'd say the most important thing that I do, though, and I'd argue this until I'm blue in the face, is before they even start training with me, I put together a really thorough and comprehensive medical questionnaire that they can answer simply from their phone. I think most people forget the most important screen is medical history. What's the biggest risk factor for future injury, previous injury history. I also put together a document that's based off some of the research I've done, for my Art of Coaching projects, that gives me insight into their personality, their learning style. Somebody's going to listen and say, oh, I heard in the news learning styles are crap. Bull. Everybody knows that people like to be communicated with in certain ways.
Yeah.
So I try to really figure out what these guys, who their favorite coach was in the past, why, how do they like to be communicated. I add some trick questions in there that make it so that they're giving me answers, but they don't really know what I'm looking at. Really what I'm looking at is what drives them. How do they deal with certain things? But yeah, we'll do reactive strength index. I track all their top loads and everything like that. So, and I do body fat. So it's pretty easy to kind of get an idea of where these guys are at, because if their weights are going up, the body fat's going down, and reactive strength index or jump profiling is getting better, they're improving. But the majority of them, if I do time them, they maybe want to do a 10, to see their burst or what have you. I'm not doing 40-yard dashes with any of these. These are pro athletes. One, they're already in the NFL. They're not going to run a 40-yard dash, unless they're on punt team, and even then it's not a full out. And then, like you said, they come in, they just finished a season, especially some of them are still going in February. Like two of the guys I trained were in the Super Bowl this year, but they're going to come back and I'm going to say, all right, guys, here we go with the conditioning test. No chance. So I would say the biggest thing I do, other than the things that I listed off, is I'm in contact with the vast majority of their strength coaches on their teams. Every now and then you get a strength coach that's kind of a curmudgeon and doesn't want to deal with private sector guys or whatever, and maybe they've had bad experiences with those guys in the past. But I would say 95% of the guys I work with, I'm in contact with their strength coach daily, and we don't discuss them individually really, because the guys can't do that per the collective bargaining agreement. But I just get an idea of what their off-season program, once these guys go back, is going to entail, so I can make sure I help them. The other day, I had somebody reach out and ask me if I do muscle biopsies with my guys. I'm like, yeah. I take guys that have a 1-year, $11 million contract, and I do muscle biopsy testing. He goes, well, do you do any lactate threshold testing, specifically blood work? I go, dude, are you kidding me? Like, you think I'm going to take a multi-million-dollar athlete and I'm going to start doing blood work and all this testing with him? That's what you think is going to move the needle right now? You know what I mean? Like, and plus that is so far out of our scope, so far out of our scope to be sitting there and being like, hey, I think people have watched 24/7 with like Manny Pacquiao too much, where they're clipping the guy's ear or doing this and then getting, doing blood lactate testing on the spot. I'm like, no, I'm not doing that for these guys right now. They have certain standards they have to meet from a conditioning standpoint. I have something that if you were to ask any of the guys I train in July, if you were to ask them about the conditioning test I put them through before they leave, it's become somewhat of an urban legend now. And it's just because we've got a formula that's worked, and it doesn't mean it can't get any better. Of course it can. Like I finish every off season feeling like I suck at my job, could have done this better. Like I'm tremendously self-critical. But I've been training NFL guys for 8 years now. And the majority of them have, there hasn't been one that's gone in and said, you know what, I feel like after the off season, I'm not ready. It doesn't need to be too complicated. At the end of the day, football is still a pretty straightforward sport.
Yeah. So you've actually answered a ton of follow-up questions I was going to have. So I was going to ask, like, where do you train them out of? So you said that you had that deal with the high school. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. And we're able to feed that into kind of the not-for-profit that I do too, in terms of working with kids and communities and what have you. So when these kids get to see pro athletes come by, it's awesome for them. And it's cool for us too, because you get these guys look around and they see the little kids and they're like, damn, I remember doing that in high school, and so it's a cool environment and it's simple.
And then another question, that actually is like, it's amazing how things just like work out. Because I remember last time we met in person, was when I was at Altus, and you were kind of in between moving back to either Arizona or going to Atlanta. And
when you got to listen to your audience, I mean, it was my athletes. One of my, it was Tyrod Taylor that talked me into coming to Atlanta, really.
Yeah.
He reached out and said, my wife and I loved the Southeast. We had lived down here before, not in Atlanta, but near it nearby. And he said, hey, man, there's nobody that's just really kind of doing bare bones, no nonsense. He's like, I feel like all these places have kind of turned into combine factories. And he's like, you ever thought about it? And my wife and I knew we wanted, a place where we could have, a yard and kids and whatever. And LA was wild and fun and, whatever. But that's, that's not the period of my life I'm in, I think that's what made it challenging to write the book. Most people, when they read about Ryan Holiday or any other author, it's like, they sit down and they have this routine and they're drinking their coffee and all this time. Yeah. I wrote that book between 11 p.m. and 2 a.m. every night during probably the second most hectic period of my life, and so, but I'd encourage more coaches to kind of put themselves in situations like that where they have to burn the boats, because it was only when I walked away from my job out there for reasons that were more related to ethics and things I was asked to do that were outside kind of my standard or my belief system. When you walk away from something, and you think, oh my gosh, for the first time in my life, I don't have a salary just sitting here waiting for me. A year and a half or a year earlier, I had gotten offered an NFL job to be a head assistant somewhere. And now you're like, now I've got to create all this, and we had to problem solve. We had to find a private facility where I'll probably make a presentation about this someday because I get asked about it a lot. But we had to find a facility where I could train guys out of in the meantime. So I'd train all day, write at night, again, speak on the weekend. It was just, you make it work, but you grow in a way that you could have, I don't feel like I ever would have grown had I just taken, kind of the normal jobs that are out there.
Absolutely. And I think a key thing is, though, that like things like that, like they are essential to growth as a human being. But I think it's very key that people realize like that was a specific period in your life. Like you're not saying this is how you need to be 24/7 your whole entire life. Because again, that just isn't sustainable. But in terms of having that as a part of your life, you'd never take it back, because the growth process must have been just immense, as you just alluded to there.
Yeah, no doubt. And that's exactly what I'm saying. I'm saying like this stuff isn't linear. You have to, there's a reason I took that risk at that part of my life. We don't have kids. We had just gotten married, what have you. But I was in a situation where I was limited, unfortunately, in what I could do. My current job at the time, I wouldn't have been allowed to write a book. I wasn't allowed to go speak at conferences. Only members of the education team were really able to do that with the same level of rapidity. And if I did do it, there wasn't going to be compensation off of it, right? And so after a while, when you start thinking, I have real bills to pay now. I have a wife to take care of. We want to have kids. We have medical things just like anybody else, right? Like I need a chance to be able to be more involved in the industry and also create more financial freedom for my family. And so it wakes you up to a lot of those things. My message there is just coaches can't be scared to take risks.
Absolutely.
If they work out, if they don't work out, like they lead you to something. And if you're just following strength and conditioning, Robbie, is going to change more in the next 10 years than it probably has in the past 20, from a vocational standpoint. And so coaches are going to have to get comfortable following non-traditional paths if they want to continue to achieve and leave a legacy in the field.
Yeah, James Smith alluded to that, comparing like physics. He's like, if you look at physics, it was pretty like, after Newton, it was pretty like linear for a period of time. And then when Einstein came along, relativity was like, boom, and it just like completely changed the game. And he says like it's going to happen in terms of like strength and conditioning. Like it's going to go just to like this completely integrated like system. He's like, strength and conditioning coaches won't be around anymore. It's just going to be like a way more integration in his realm of thinking, in regards to sports preparation. So he's kind of in a similar thought process. And then James with OPEX is similar when it comes into, he's like, medicine and fitness are going to be like this in the next 10, 20 years. Is like they'll be inseparable in terms of people's overall health and wellness. So there is going to be some big changes in our profession for sure, I would imagine. So just getting a little more on back to our main topic again with American football. So just a little summary so far. So you do some profiling, mainly just with the jump mat. Are you looking there again, counter, reactive index, doing a bit of
those, yeah, and it's not just a jump mat. I just give you a sample. I'll do lateral bound, like a lateral. It's really a lateral bound with a 2-foot landing to kind of take a look at how these guys produce force in the frontal plane. I'll do a triple hop test, that looks at kind of, it's a standard for kind of ACL return to play. So again, just, I don't know the background of all the viewers. So when I just want consistency, when I speak, jump is 2 foot landing to 2 foot, or 2 foot takeoff to 2 foot landing. Hop is same foot to same foot, one leg. So if I go off my right leg, land on my right leg, and bound is one to the opposite. So, I really like the triple hop. We were able to look at that and get some really interesting data from that this year. Just, you can tell so much about guys, not only the integrity of and the strength of each individual limb, but also some of them, there's one guy that Pro Bowl running back for 5 years, but was absolutely miserable on the horizontal triple hop. Does everybody, what I mean by the triple hop kind of test?
Yes.
Yeah. Going for horizontal distance off one leg, go off of it and land in it. He was awful. And somebody would be like, oh man, he must be weak. And yeah, there was some weakness there, but a lot of it was ankle mobility related. The guy couldn't preload. And so he had the strength. And when you changed, a certain amount of the kinematics, he could produce force more effectively. But his ankle was still locked up. And so, I'll test frontal plane power. I'll test the triple hop. Of course, we do strength tests. I don't work guys up to much more than a 2 RM, and that testing is built into the training in the max strength phase. I don't have like a testing day where we turn on bodies, hit the floor, and everybody gets, live. Like it's just part of their testing day, and then I'm able to auto-regulate their loads and manage it from there. But yeah, a lot of what we do is neural. So, if it's 10-yard burst, if it's the jump mat, reactive strength index, all those things, if it's triple hop, we'll look at that for structural integrity. We'll look at the lateral broad. Sometimes we'll do granny toss throws. It just depends on the group I get. But again, like I get these guys late February. Many of them have to leave by mid-April. I need to get them a fucking adaptation. Sorry for my language. You know what I mean? But like, so I'll look at where they're at, but I'm not spending much more than a week on these things and getting an initial kind of guideline. And then people also have to understand in the private sector, it's a rolling start. So these guys can join anytime, so I can have 5 people the last week in January, and all of a sudden between that week and 3 more weeks, a bunch more people can join. So people have to understand you have to create testing that is fluid. I don't have assistants. I don't have interns, so I can't create a testing battery much more than 5 to 6 things. Otherwise, whenever a new group comes in, I can't do that. It's already a struggle enough getting them, NFL's different. The minute they reach out, I send them a waiver. I send them, all this information. So you've got to manage the logistics of everything on that end, and so we try to do what matters, and we try to look at I think people fall in love with testing too much and they forget what they're testing. You have to look at what are the common injuries here. Okay, hamstring, Achilles, ACL, these things, like what are things that can kind of give me a glimpse there. And then it's very odd. Like I said, some of these guys come in and, the jump profiling is helpful because some of them are nothing but tendons and springs, and they need more strength to reinforce that. And other guys are just big old blocks of, it looks like they've done nothing but lift above 85% their whole life, and they can't produce force rapidly. And then some guys are just still, and I'm not trying to be funny, but some guys just still are much more advanced than high school athletes, trying to lift. And sometimes they're behind high school athletes because they've been, and they don't know how to lift.
Yeah. So just a quick question there for you. That lateral bound test, so are they bounding, landing on 2 feet on the mat and then jumping?
It's a bound-based takeoff. So it's hard to, I try to post as many videos as I can on my Instagram so people, see examples of what I'm, let's imagine we're on a line, and what will happen there is I'll load, if I'm standing on my left leg, I'll bring the right leg kind of in, as you would almost initiate a skater bound, right? And then I'll load into that and spring out, right? And so I'm able to spring out purely in the frontal plane, land on 2. We have measuring tape, measuring stick, all that.
Sorry. So just I understand now. So you're just measuring the distance that they're getting there.
Horizontal distance. Yeah.
I thought you had them bound, land on 2 legs on the just jump, and then jump up.
No. I want to look at how they produce force frontal plane. And this is it's not a novel test. It's something that hockey has used for a very long time.
I get you now.
I just want to see how well they load into that hip, exploding out. It's incredible. Some of them, they don't even go out, they'll completely miss the measuring tape, or they're like, I cannot load into that hip. So it makes it easier to fit in my soft tissue interventions when I'm like, yeah, dude, like you're bound up, man. Like get the baseball, get the lacrosse ball, like get in there. Because a lot of them don't like doing the soft tissue stuff.
Yeah.
But the point is everything comes together like a snapshot. Most coaches would be well served to read the biography of Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci never looked at one thing. He looked at a ton of different aspects, right? Even like whether it was the sky and the dirt and conversations with people, things that were seemingly unrelated are the most often interconnected. If I know how somebody loads and puts force out there from a frontal plane standpoint, if I have some information on reactive strength index, if I have some information on just their overall ability to project force in any plane of motion with a certain level of rate of force development, what have you, and then I can see the way they move during the session, I can see what their weights are doing and where they struggle in certain patterns in the weight room. All that stuff together forms a composite. Listen, strength coaches were very effective without $20,000 machines telling them what to do for a very long time. And that doesn't mean that people can't have the toys, but even if I took a fancy job today, I'd probably limit my really cool technology to 2 to 3. I do have a Nord board. This year I chose not to use it as much because I had some guys that were really spooked by it. 3 came from a team where they did Nord board testing on a Wednesday. And then they both pulled hamstrings on a Friday. Now that's logistical management and programming and stuff like that they dealt with on their teams. But these were guys that I just worked with for the first time. I am not going to try to build trust by then putting them in a situation where, they're doing something where they're already pretty freaked out and spooked by it. So what I do typically in that circumstance is it's like getting people over a phobia, right? It's a mild progression into that exposure. So we have Nordics as part of our programming. We have a variety of eccentric protocols. But then when they come back, I can say, hey, now we've done them. We're going to do them at this point in the week. It's just a measure, what have you. So I do have a Nord board. I'll look at that occasionally. Guys are comfortable with it. Did
you buy that, Brett, or do they give it to you to test it out?
I invest in this stuff, and again, that's why I have to be really choosy. I never jump on something the minute it comes out into the market.
Yeah. That's a big investment in our board.
We work something out, right? So it's like I'm able to help people in a variety of different, I just wrote an article on networking. In my view, networking is providing value to other people. It's not about what you can get for yourself. I try to work with companies the best way I can to help them solve certain pain points and do things. And then sometimes that's, that is financial. I'm not living in, people think that, private sector people make all these money. You don't. I'm investing heavily in this stuff. And, but I also try to be really selective about it. And a jump mat's $300. And do you need a Nord board to do anything? No. Like I said, I use it for a select few guys that I know are comfortable with it, or value the information, that I know have the emotional maturity to go through that testing protocol the way they need to. So I'm not just I never test just to test, ever. I'm not going to do that, and people also need to understand that the sociocultural aspects of NFL players, these guys are very, very, very good at telling you what you want to hear, kind of putting out, they'll do things when they want to do it, the way they want to do it. So you have to be a bit tricky in how you do this stuff. I've had guys do versions of the APRE where, for 3 weeks, we've gotten some consistent data that would allude to the fact that we know where their load should be. And then very next week, the guy does 15 reps when he should have hit 3 to 5. And I said, what was the difference here, man? He goes, I go, the last 3 weeks, you've been spot on with all this stuff. And he goes, what? He goes, oh, I wanted to. Right. And that's it's completely different than I try to tell my friend Matt J, who works with the Cronulla Sharks in Australia. I try to explain to him, because rugby's so different, right? Those guys love training. It's part of the culture. They welcome the technology. NFL players are not like that here. There is not a lot of trust between them and the league. Even people that are collecting heart rate data, it's not uncommon, for athletes to either they won't wear this, or they'll put it around their waist instead, and then they'll act like it didn't happen because they think, and in some cases, I'm sure it's true, they think that these organizations are trying to find reasons basically to cut them or shave off their contract and what have you. And here's the funny thing, right? Everybody's in love with GPS. How much do they travel? How much do they do this? More efficient athletes don't travel as far. If you look at Floyd Mayweather, I give a shit how many times he moves around the ring. He's better off conserving that energy. You look at Steph Curry. Andrea Hootie was talking about this at her clinic recently. I get obsessed with GPS and seeing how much people travel when the best at what they do find ways to compensate and pick their shots. So, I'll take the GPS data knowing that wide receivers basically will cover more than 5,000 yards. And this depends if they're a slot wide receiver or what they're doing. And I'll look at that in terms of kind of managing physical preparation, knowing what they might be exposed to. But my point is that I don't even know if I'd use GPS if I was with the team. I'd maybe use it for part of the year to get ranges and see how it matches up with our offensive scheme so I know where we're at. But, I'm not going to sit here and be like, this athlete's speed was down here. Yeah, his speed might be down if he knows how to take more efficient cuts. You get a guy that's really good at geometry and physics. He doesn't need to travel as fast or run this or do that. So I just think all this stuff can be a bit, and again, I'm not against it. Obviously, you're hearing what I use, but I think there's a pendulum, and as is everything with our industry, we love swinging the pendulum one way completely or the other.
Yeah.
That's everybody trying to prove their value, by the way. That's why this stuff happens. Half the people out there saying they're doing stuff aren't really doing it.
Listen, I know you've only got 5 minutes, so just want to wrap up here real quick. So just so far anyway, summary-wise with your profile, and so we do the jump profile, you look at lateral bound, you look at the with the tree, is it 3 hops in a row or 3 bounds for that ACL you're looking at, or for, well, not for ACL, but looking for that.
So I'll start on my right foot.
Right, left.
1, 2, 3 on the right stick. I do an indoctrination phase where we add that to our plyometric routine early on. And I have them land on 2 just because there's got to be a familiarization phase there. And again, these are multi-million dollar athletes. I'm not going to say, I got a great test, guys. Now worry about, hopefully you don't hyperextend your knee on the landing. Yeah. If you're looking at my testing sheet, Robbie, to kind of give you an idea is, I have a collective, I categorize everything. So in my strength profile, I have 5 lifts I'll look at, then I have a power profile, general term that will encompass my reactive strength work, any kind of the jump profiling, the triple hop, what have you. I'll have an agility profile, which look at some reactive decision-making thing. I'll have a speed profile or an acceleration profile, depending on what we're doing. And then I have an energy system profile. And those things, what lives under those categories may change and alter per the groups I'm working with. Fighters, back squats, not in their strength profile. These guys have backed up shoulders, arms, elbows. So that might be safety squat or trap bar deadlift. Do I think trap bar deadlift is a suitable replacement for a squat? Absolutely not. But if I have a fighter that's got screwed up wrists, elbows, shoulders, you have to look at these things. That my main philosophy, here's probably the best answer to your question, right? My main philosophy in everything I do was actually driven not by any strength and conditioning textbook. It was my exercise physiology class in undergrad at Kansas State. It was the best class I had ever taken. We had 4 teachers that all taught different parts, whether hormonal adaptations, cardiorespiratory adaptations, musculoskeletal adaptations, but everything was based on what the body does and needs in order to derive an adaptation at the basic structural cellular level. And so I just knew, we learned so much about stress and what was necessary and what the body could accommodate. So the way I look at everything is, will this drive an adaptation in the shortest and most ethical amount of time? Yeah. If it doesn't, I don't do it. Yeah. Now, sometimes from a motor learning standpoint, that's cost me. When I was an undergraduate and I first was coaching athletes, I wouldn't program an exercise unless I could load the shit out of it. Mm-hmm. So if we were looking at an auxiliary movement, so to speak, Robbie, and I wanted to add some frontal plane work. Let's say I was working with tennis or even baseball. I would always eschew a lateral squat variation for some variation of a lunge or rear foot elevated split squat or something else that I knew I could load more heavily. Mm-hmm. The issue becomes, as you get older, you realize that load isn't the only thing that drives those kinds of adaptations, right? Of course, we know velocity and everything else, but here's what always threw me through a loop early on. And this was just me being a meathead in my own training. If an athlete has always done those types of movements, right? They've always favored kind of the basic patterns loaded heavily. They actually may get a better or more robust adaptation off of doing something that they can't load as heavily, but challenges the neuromuscular system in a slightly different way. Yeah. And that was my motor learning background that taught me that. So yesterday, for my own training, I was doing single leg squats to bench, right? You can load those pretty good. And I know there's some YouTube stars that will put 12 weight vests on and this, but you can't load it as much as you could like a barbell lunge or, a trap bar, rear foot elevated split squat with the open trap bar. But it had been so damn long since I had done those that just adding that in changes the game, right? And so I think the point I'm getting at is everything I do is driven by adaptation and what will give me the maximal adaptive response, but that's contextual on the individual. What does that for a 10-year veteran like Tyrod Taylor, who loves heavy training, but now is getting to a point in his career where he's got to battle tendinopathies, kind of working out almost every day of his life growing up has really started to catch up to him. I'll actually keep him performing better and more fresh when he does some kind of alternate version that may look soft at first, but really he's getting a lot more out of that.
Yeah.
Like guys were doing push jerks the other day. Tyrod was doing a landmine push jerk. Me 10 years ago would have been like, really, dude? You're not going to move that much load, and I'm like, listen, this dude's throwing like crazy. He's 10 years in the league. He doesn't need to do a heavy barbell push jerk overhead anymore, especially when we know that he's got some things that bugs. And so I think I'm just a lot less married to things. And I know that more things than just load and velocity can derive an adaptation. That being said, I am some guy that, I do think most people lack strength. And so load is the first place that I go once the pattern's correct, efficient, and we can do so responsibly.
Sweet. So I know you gotta go for my own sanity. So I was just saying, so it's a lateral bound and a triple hop test. They're the two things I was like that were trying to get clear in my head.
I just say, I just call it a lateral, and I'd have to look. I have the hockey literature that they've got a name for it, right? All these things end up becoming like the Anderson bound or the Borg test,
I'll tell you what we'll do. So, because I know you got to go, we'll get you back booked in and back on for part 2. Because like I've got tons of going to like hypertrophy and speed, and I wanted you to touch on that, and then obviously just want to touch on some other general things like some of the biggest lessons you've learned since we've last spoken, and book recommendations and other things like that. But and even what would be great is if you could we could share the screen and you could show like your profile and as you were laying out there and how it might differ for even maybe different sports or even different positions within maybe American football. So, but I think for right now, a hard stop is good because I know you got to go and train an NFL player.
I will say this. So I lay out my training philosophy really clear cut in a presentation that I give called Confessions of a Strength Coach. I'm trying to see if it's on my website. And, on my website, if people just go to brettbartholomew.net.
I'll link all that up in the show notes.
Yeah, there's, every podcast, nearly every podcast I've been on, any article I've written, anything I've put out. Yeah, Confessions of a Strength Coach is on my website. And, it's kind of I did it for Altus. They had asked me, I think it was my 10th year of S&C, and they just said, hey, what are some reflections? What are some things that you've learned over the 10 years? So I give a thumbnail view of what I think about speed, agility, strength training, all this stuff, where we go wrong, where we go right. Of course, they give you an hour. So it's not like I'm up there sitting there showing every spreadsheet. And frankly, I'm not going to do that. Like if people want to see examples of my programs, like they can go to my Instagram and I'm pretty right. But I've learned the hard way. The other day, somebody in the UK somehow got one of my presentations, put their name on it and turned it in for, one of their thesis things. And it was on their website. So, I'm totally happy sharing kind of examples and snapshots, but I've also learned the hard way that unfortunately the people pleaser in me, can no longer allow to just give people these things carte blanche because people just aren't responsible with it, but it's nothing fancy. Before you leave here, I'll do this right now. I'll even show it. I'll just pull up a version of it. This is an older version that I had worked off of.
You're going to be late.
No, you're fine. All right. Pull this thing up. Everybody's going to have to deal with a little bit of dead air here for a minute while we pull this up. My rearranging Google Drive.
Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it.
And the important thing is what I've done is I've created it's a skeleton, so to speak. So no matter, this can change no matter who I'm working with. And let's see, here we go. Testing. With speed, I'll touch on this real quick. And again, this is kind of, just a brief response, but, speed, again, I think that this is something that's got a little bit out of control. Football players, you have so many camps here. And of course, it just depends on what people are trying to drive in their agenda. But, you have some people, you have a camp that will say, well, top speed is where the game breaking plays happen and what have you. Yeah, but how do they get there? Right? Like it's still an agility, change of direction, and acceleration based sport, and decel is critically important too. Sure, we need top speed, but the NFL is rife with examples of people that have been fast or track stars that came in and, didn't pan out and all this stuff. And, speed, few things work faster than just sprinting, and knowing how to manage that. Of course, there's technical aspects of it as well. But you have to address the nervous system. You have to address postural considerations, and then you got to sprint. And they've looked at research on this. Of course, max strength helps. Of course, power helps. Of course, a variety of things help. But none of that stuff matters if you're not sprinting the guys.
Got to go to specificity.
Yeah, it's just simple. And so this is I just struggle. I think, Robbie, and this is kind of why I started turning to the art of coaching after a while. Because people keep waiting for some magical program to come out as if they're going to say, hey, you know what? Dan Paff's created a program that's going to work for every athlete, every age, every sport. That doesn't happen. Like, people just need to use common sense. And if you don't know what common sense is, you need to study a little bit more of the basic material of what it takes to be a strength coach.
Well, common sense isn't that common. Was it Benjamin Franklin that said that?
Yeah, unfortunately, as you know, like if there's still people that have been in this field for about 5 years plus, and their biggest question is, how do I get someone fast?
Look at that.
Right. Can you see my screen?
I can indeed, sir.
Okay. We're going to walk through this real quick. So this is an example of NFL offseason, kind of how I look at everything. This was my 2015 example. I always have their offseason schedule. I always kind of know what's going on in terms of important league dates, when they have to report, all those pieces. I then look at a longer-term performance plan. I'll try to blow this up a little bit. Pretty straightforward. Again, like, if somebody copies this, be my guest, but it would probably take you less time to make your own thing. So I'll kind of look at what I call just postseason, OTA prep, which is a period where they're getting ready to go back for their team for a little bit, and then training camp prep. The stoplight system is used intentionally. Yellow, it's a little bit reverse here, though. Yellow is kind of our foundational period. This is where, and I draw it in here. Yeah, it's laying foundation. The goal is just, we're doing some kind of eval daily. It's based on, looking at hips, groin, shoulders, main focus, plyometrics. Just starting off, it's really more jump training than it is plyo. It's very low intensity, focused on building tendon and tissue tolerance, base, split drops, stability-based movements, one leg, two leg. Do some med ball work. I'm big on ballistics. Again, 2 times per week. Movements, non-sport specific, general movement principles and skills. And I have examples of these things. But as you can imagine, it just goes from simple to more complex.
General to specific.
Yep, I'll lay out a sample kind of weekly session layout, kind of just where are we at, what days, what times, what have you. And then, I give examples of strength programming. This is a very basic one. So this was early on. Kaiser speed squat, and again, nobody needs to run with assumptions here. This is, if you have questions, ask me about it. Usually how I break it up is I do 2 Olympic weightlifting based days, 2 alternative power based days. But this is usually their first in doc. So I usually kind of keep that easy. And that's one example. I create 3 examples for basically every kind of situation I may encounter. Because in the private sector,
they train total body every day. So see, the low body push or body pull, and then the following.
Yeah, and why wouldn't you early on, right? Like, their loading's not a big issue. So we're going to train upper push, lower pull, lower push, upper pull, very light, easy, general, just getting a whole body stimulus. Really easy. Here's an example, right? Another example. We'll do a clean derivation. We'll do a snatch derivation. We'll do some iso-explosive things. Here's a lot of eccentric and isometric work. So we're pairing an eccentric squat up with 3-position iso.
Recondition those soft tissues after a tough season.
100%. Yeah. We'll get into movement options. So if, I'll scale this out. 4 days of movement. You can see here, I'll do a general tracking of ground contacts. I don't get too married to it, but I'll look at those things and look at ground contacts. So an acceleration day in early February, late January, it could be as simple as, we're going to do soft tissue. We're going to do some mobility, do a little bit of activation. Let's go through a dynamic warm-up. We may follow all this. We may follow none of it. It's just a general neural activation, just kind of getting the body primed. Plyo, tissue tolerance, single leg drop, stability focus, single leg drop, broad jump, single leg or a depth drop to non-counter movement jump, kind of getting them into that. Skill acquisition, we may do wall drills, not because they're matchable, but because it helps me reinforce postural considerations later on. We'll start to lose these pretty quick. linear marching, light harness or sled push for patterning.
Nice.
Skill integration, we'll do some slides or strides at 75 to 80% from different positions. So half kneeling, 2-point start, 3-point start, what have you. We'll do med ball chaser, where they'll explode out with the med ball. Push-up starts, position starts, we mix and vary that up, right? Now, we can get all the way down. If you look at the bottom of the screen, these are all different, these movement examples will start to be a little bit more complex over time. I have agility drills. I'll try to keep things very straightforward. You get to phase 3 before training camp. We start turning up the heat a little bit. The program will take a little bit of a different feel to it. Let's see, movement samples. We do a lot more drills because they're going to have to be exposed to those things.
Would they still be doing total body, or now would you split that into upper lower as they get more?
It depends. Pre-training camp, they're never, once we get into like max strength and hypertrophy and more aggressive, we're doing upper lower splits, things like that. Pre-training camp, though, we'll go back to total body because we need an overall systemic response. So I might do 2 weeks. If I have them for 5 weeks prior to camp, I might do 2 weeks foundational total body just because I'm getting them back for the first time in a month and a half or 2 months. I need to see where they're at. I'm probably going to get some new guys as well that I've never worked with. And then after that, we'll start to get into a strength and really power endurance type theme because they're going to go into camp and just get hammered. And a lot of it is higher density, and they're going to have to be exposed to that. But real quick before I bounce, here's an example going from the most basic acceleration to like if we were doing a linear combo focused day later on. You can see I still have my soft tissue, still have the movement prep. Plyos, I separated rookies from vets because those guys are going to have more wear and tear on their body. Nothing crazy, just simple variations that adjust here and there. And if anybody wants to see examples of this stuff, go to my Instagram. I'm far more active on Instagram than Twitter and Facebook these days because you can share videos. You can share people can hide on Twitter. They can say they're doing all these great things. They can say they're doing this and that. But if you never see examples of what they're doing, I'd caution you to believe that in totality. Not that you need to share everything you do. There's some stuff I keep close to the vest because it just is what it is. And you want to make sure people understand the context behind it and use it responsibly. But on Instagram, I show a lot of this stuff. Skill acquisition. Now we may just touch on wall drills again. And it might be as simple as saying, loads and lists, do this. Remember, guys, we're doing this so that when I cue you up, you understand what it should feel like to upright posture or this angle or that angle. Then we'll go into harness work, resisted marching to bound, resisted marching to sprint, skill application for rookies or people that just came in. It still might be 2-point starts at body weight, 2-point start with a sled, push-up start. Vets, they may do some warm-up accelerations because their body needs to kind of, some of these guys are beat to hell. We may do speed sack accelerations or longer-term sprints. This day isn't purely acceleration. As we get into training camp, I start comboing the movement days. So, Monday linear combo might be acceleration biased 1 week with elements of top speed. And then next week, it might be more top speed biased with elements of acceleration.
Gotcha. Brett, because I know you're under time pressure, right? I'd prefer if we wrapped it and we did a part 2, because if you like get killed in a car crash, your wife's going to kill me.
No problem. You're fine. If anybody wants more information, just go to myname.net. Really easy. Although it took me about 5 years to get this damn website because some guy wouldn't sell it. If anybody wants to see the course, and I know Robbie's going to link this up.
I'll link all that up, yeah.
The second round goes in June, but you can get a full sample video.
Unreal course. Amazing course.
Thank you. You can get the whole thing. So, I try to put myself out there as much as possible. I'd like to think I'm one of the most transparent coaches there is. I'll leave that for everybody else to decide whether they agree with that. But thanks for your time, man. It's always good talking to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Listen, you get going. And guys, thanks for watching. We're going to wrap up here. And I'm definitely getting this gentleman back on for part 2 because I have a ton of questions that I want to ask.
All right. Take care, buddy.
See you, bud.